Well, you can live that way and then be unhappy for the rest of your life, but you're not doing anyone a favor. Acceptance does not mean surrendering to it and not then taking any action. But so often we notice those things and then we try and push it aside, or we think we shouldn't feel that way. Everything is perfect in my life. I have nothing to complain about, really. I shouldn't want any more than I already have. That shows that it kind of goes the other way around. When we're happy, we actually perform better. But when then we look at research overall, we just know that this is bidirectional. That happiness is the lowest in midlife. That's just a massive stat that we have. And it's because
Dr. Maike Neuhaus is a psychologist, speaker, and coach specializing in positive psychology, intentional living, and the science of wellbeing. With a PhD in behavior change and a deep commitment to helping people flourish, she's the founder of The Flourishing Dog. This conversation is all about letting go of outdated narratives, redefining success, and creating a life that truly feels good from the inside out. We don't want to wait till we get to that point where it's like, okay, this just isn't working for me. I can't cope anymore. How do we start to tune into that a little bit earlier before that earthquake? When you said there's those first little rumblings. Let's go
mm,
back there. How do we start to
yeah,
tune into it there, the rumblings?
absolutely. And I adore your questions. They're so good. Because so some of the rumblings, some of the first signs are things like maybe some of the things you used to enjoy, you don't enjoy so much anymore. Maybe the people who were your key people and felt so good and so right for you for so long, maybe all of a sudden they don't inspire you so much anymore. Maybe maybe you start to think differently. Maybe you have different needs. Maybe you feel starting to feel stuck, maybe not as motivated, maybe not as energized. Maybe the things and activities you used to do that used to energize you feel somewhat meaningless and boring now. You feel like something is missing. You feel like you just want something else. Everything is okay on the outside, but somehow something is missing.
Mm.
So, you know, that feeling of desorientation, stuckness, lack of motivation, things aren't the way they used to be. They used to be. People don't mean the same to me as they used to. All of those can be some of those signs.
Mm. For someone who's feeling that way, so who's starting to feel maybe not quite burnout, but a little bit disconnected. And I think that, this is really common, I have to say, because I want to highlight that because I think there's so many people out there who are listening who are thinking, yeah, I'm not feeling that joy anymore. Or I'm feeling, I'm not getting that pleasure from work, or I'm not looking forward to this meeting or this interaction with this person. I think we can get really stuck on that autopilot for quite a long time. And in my experience, both personally and professionally, I see a lot of people just kind of stuck in autopilot or avoidance or whatever it may be for years, often at times. So if someone's starting to sense that feeling, what can they do? What action can they take? Just a small step to start to shift.
Mm. The first step is always to notice it, not beat yourself up about it, honor it, and just accept it. I'm a big fan of acceptance, and acceptance does not mean surrendering to it and not then taking any action. But so often we notice those things and then we try and push it aside, or we think we shouldn't feel that way. Everything is perfect in my life. I have nothing to complain about, really. I shouldn't want any more than I already have. Well, you can live that way and then be unhappy for the rest of your life, but you're not doing anyone a favor. So the first step is honoring that and accepting that and noticing that. And the second step is just becoming really curious with yourself. Explore, well, what is it? What if you don't need this anymore? If this doesn't fill your cup anymore, what does? And if you don't know, start exploring. Try new things, meet with different people, explore whether it is something else you need to do for work, take on, I don't know, an internship. So just become curious and playful and start experimenting. And again, remind yourself that this is a normal part of the human experience, even phases of languishing. Katie, you and I live in Australia, and I just happen to know that in Australia, about 1 in 5 people are currently languishing. I'm guessing it's probably more, but some of the stats, and we don't have a lot of stats yet, but probably 1 in 5 languish at any one time. Um, but I also want to say, so, chances that you are going to languish at some stage, and I mean, we've been through COVID pandemic a couple of years ago, where probably a lot of people languish because of a lot of the things that we need in order to flourish and have that mental well-being fell away, right? You're down near Melbourne or in Victoria, going out, seeing people, eating out, doing the things you love outdoors and in nature and so forth. We couldn't do that for a very long time. So chances are a lot of your listeners might have experienced languishing in their lives already too. So becoming curious and trying different things, understanding yourself, understand your values again, understand your strengths, understand your passions. If you can tap into some of those sparks, those things and activities and people and books and podcasts and whatever sparks a fire in you, follow that. Just follow that. And I also, though, Katie, just briefly want to highlight that it is completely normal to feel stuck every now and then, to feel demotivated, to feel flat, not to have the same amount of energy. I mean, those things are part of the human experience. I know we all have the ambition to be happy all the time, but that is not possible. And that's not sustainable and that's not healthy either. So we might go through phases where we feel a little bit more deflated or, less motivated or whatever. That can also just be normal.
Absolutely, and it is just about taking care of yourself in that moment and doing those things that you need to shift your mood a little bit. Or and also just sometimes just accepting the feelings is really important. Like it's normal to have low days, it's normal to feel a bit stuck sometimes. But I guess what we're also talking about is recognizing that when that becomes more consistent and when we need to do something about it, is you said that languishing state. And I know Victorians would feel very familiar with that, after which a lot of people around the world can connect with that idea of like, long lockdowns, long periods of being separated from others. But really, when we're talking about that languaging state, it is sort of a time to kind of sit back and reflect and think about, what does make me happy and what do I need right now? And that may have shifted considerably. So it is about taking that opportunity, I guess, to redefine. We've used the word success a lot, but it's really about redefining what your life looks like, really redefining what makes you happy and how you want to live your life. Can you tell me, what are some of the mindsets or fears that stop people from doing that and stop people from doing that self reflection or taking action in that way to live a life in alignment with their own values, their own desires?
Well, where to start? I guess there's so many. So first of all, we spoke about this earlier. It's the fear of, letting go of some of their success markers already. And what will other people think if all of a sudden, I'm so old, I'm now changing careers. There's this notion of midlife crisis, oh, of course, it's so typical, if I now get separated or if I now change careers completely, what other people are just going to say, oh, she or he has a midlife crisis,
I've just
and gives you
realized I'm having a midlife crisis.
do you did you actually?
No, but when you said that, I was like, that midlife, changing
Yeah,
careers. I was like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, maybe that's how
Oh,
people view my life right now. I
it's
moved to
good.
Bali.
Yeah, right. But that's good. It's a midlife opportunity. We need to
Yes.
reframe that
Yep.
because it's just people recognizing their earthquake or that they're about to have that earthquake. And so they start to take action. And sure, sometimes it's a little bit desperate action because we don't know how to help ourselves. We don't
Mhm.
have that literacy, that positive psychology or mental well being or flourishing literacy yet. People are lost. So, of course, they go and buy a Ferrari if they can. I mean, there's a nice dopamine kick or whatever. Not for me, but although, anyway. So, research shows that for our generation, it's starting to look different now in newer generations, unfortunately. But in our generation, happiness is the lowest in midlife. That's just a massive stat that we have. And it's because we start to, we are born, we're kids, we're excited about everything, hopefully. Apart from the fact that there's a set point and a big genetic component to our sort of set point level of happiness as well. So, levels of happiness vary across individuals from birth, basically. But we go through life, as a kid, adolescent, and so forth. We come into adulthood, everything is exciting. You build, you set goals, you get to know yourself, you're excited about things. So you strive and you start building things. You start building your life. At some stage, you buy your first house. Maybe you get married or you find the right one, or maybe you have children and all those things. We come to midlife the goals or the theme, if you will, changes from building to maintaining in life. So what happens naturally is that you go, hang on a minute. Am I actually happy to keep playing this game? Everything that I have, this house, this city, this work, this career, this job, this partner, these children. Okay, would kind of tend to keep our children, don't want to give them. But am I happy to maintain that for the next 30 years or until I die? So, of course, we ask ourselves that question. Or is there anything else? Is there more to life than this? Is this it? And we just keep playing this. You would hope that people ask themselves that question. And you would hope that if people identify that actually there's something still missing, actually, there's something I was always hoping to still try or explore, whatever, you would hope they do that. So when people start taking radical action and they start changing things, like they move to Bali or I don't know, or they get divorced if they realize, well, this relationship isn't it. The partner actually isn't it. Or we've had our best years and it's just no longer working because guess what? People change. And can you expect for both partners to change in the exact same direction for 50 years so that you're still, clicking and be happy for the rest of your life? Sure, love is also a decision, but I'm just saying it's actually a good thing that people have so-called midlife crises or opportunities where they then acknowledge something is missing or not so good anymore and they try out different things. So I'm happy
Mm.
for you.
I didn't really mean I was having a midlife crisis, but when
Okay.
you said it, I did think like, obviously when we moved to Bali and we told people we were doing that, they did kind of respond in that way of like, "Oh, are you okay? Like, what are you doing?" Kind of their own beliefs around our choices. I love the way that you reframe that in terms of like midlife crisis to midlife opportunity, or really, I think it's in any key chapter in our life where we do take a moment, we take stock, and we see the opportunity to do something a little bit differently, to do it in a way that's going to bring us joy, that's going to bring us the life that we want to live is so important. I'm wondering if you've also had a moment in your life where you have, redefined what success looks like for you and what that process has been like.
Yeah, lots of moments, I guess. And I've always challenged the status quo. I'm one of those little rebels, ask my parents, that can tell you many stories. So,
I
I
feel like
moved.
we are kindred spirits.
Yeah, we didn't I post something in my Insta story yesterday? Like, if you're not living in a way that church would have burnt you like 400 years ago, are you even living or something like that?
Love that.
Um, so absolutely, I've had those phases. So, for example, at some stage I had to acknowledge to myself that the career I was building and living for many years wasn't my career. It was great, an academic career, and it was great, and it looked amazing to the outside, and great title, and good pay, and good conditions, and everything, and well respected. I had been unhappy for years. I just didn't really know what to do instead. I was looking. Obviously, at some stage, I realized positive psychology and flourishing and self-leadership is my kinda thing, but there were no real jobs in that,
Mm.
The type of clients I wanna work with are the ones that actually want to change. So, often in research, I was working with populations who were told to change, and then it was my job to help them with that, but, like, completely different vibe. Um, so anyway, I have been through those situations, and to be fully transparent, I've been talking about love as well, and I'm just going through that right now, coming out of a relationship of 20 years. Because it sounds, and my idea was always, to find the right one and then that's it for the rest of your life. And I still like
Mm.
that idea. But at some stage, after so many years of trying to fix something that I just thought maybe isn't fixable anymore, without anything having been really wrong or damaged by either of us, um, just acknowledging that we'd grown apart. And why force yourself? Why force these ideas upon yourself? And of course, now it's like to the outside, it always looks like, oh, when I say I'm going through separation, or often I'll call it divorce because I've always spoken about my husband and so forth. We never got married, but
Yeah.
you stop calling your partner boyfriend after 20 years, right? Um, And people put on their sad faces and they say, "I'm so sorry." It's like, "No, this is really good." Of course, there are really hard parts, especially when there's children involved and so forth. You just have to do it right, and luckily, we're both mature and good people who respect each other and so forth and can make it work. Of course, there are hard parts, but I've been through phases in my life where, I've questioned everything and things that are important and things that really matter. And of course, you don't throw them overboard overnight. If they are big things and if they're important things, you want to make sure you think about them and you really consider it and sleep on it more than just one night. But at some stage, you got to find your courage and just go, think it's best for everybody. Because if it's better for you, if you're drowning or if you're languishing, living a certain
Mm.
life, you're not helping anyone with that.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard you talk about there too was that idea of like grieving the idea of something versus the reality, So when we are letting go of something, whether that be the career, whether that be the relationship, or whatever it may be that we are choosing to move forward from, is that quite often we get stuck with the grief of the idea of. So let's just say, for example, the career that we've worked towards for so long that, we have this idea of like, this is what success looks like. This is what when I achieve that success, I will feel a certain way. And maybe we get there. Maybe we do feel that for a while, but then something shifts. And sometimes we can stay in that position because we're stuck on the idea of what it should look like or what it should feel like or what it should be versus the reality of how we're experiencing it.
That is so true. And, often I'll say only because it's hard doesn't mean it was the wrong decision. Only because it feels
Yes.
tough doesn't make it wrong. And it's so true what you're saying. We're grieving the idea of something. And I think sometimes we often think that only because something feels tough that it was, we shouldn't have done something or whatever, and that's the beauty in identifying exactly what your values are and what really matters to you and living with authenticity because then you are able to wholeheartedly say, sure, this is tough, but I know it's the right path, you know?
Mm,
So giving yourself time to acknowledge that and work through that and grieve that too. We always think we only grieve death. We grieve,
no,
so
there's so
we're
much to
allowed to
grieve in
grieve.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that is, as you said, it's such an important part of that process. And then even as we start to look forward, you're talking really about recognizing that that change isn't going to be instantaneous. So,
Oh.
whether it be, using those two examples, if we're leaving a role or we're leaving a relationship or we're shifting careers, even, then there is gonna be a process in that where we may feel a little bit worse before we start to feel better,
Mm.
and that recognizing and holding on to those values and that choice of what we are heading towards is so important in terms of managing, or I don't wanna say managing because it's not a process we manage, but we feel our way through really. So I just want to talk to you about some of the myths that you've encountered. I'm sure, you've encountered many myths around the idea of success or well-being or what that looks like. What are some of the myths that you've encountered that you can dispel for us?
So many. I mean, one is maybe to start that success and well-being are the same thing. I mean, that's something I guess we
Mhm.
can bust right now. But, one of the biggest ones, I guess, is that success comes first and then follows happiness. I'll be happy when.
That is huge. Like that idea of I'll be happy when I hear that so often. And then also, I'm sure you've experienced on the other side of that when people are at that when, and then the happiness doesn't come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, miss wanting is one thing, right? But also, so we know that this goes both ways. So we know that when we're happy or when we're in the positively, regulated emotional state, we actually our brains function a lot better, right? You could say that's like the opposite to the fight or flight response, right? When we're relaxed and we actually feel good and regulated, we
Mhm.
can use the full spectrum of our brain's capacity. So, we will have good decision making, we will be more innovative, more creative, we will be more productive. We deal better with when we're client facing, so we can build better relationships with other people. So, there's so much research in that area. It's called the broaden and build theory by Barbara Fredrickson, that shows that. it kind of goes the other way around. When we're happy, we actually perform better. So, but when then we look at research overall, we just know that this is bidirectional. This relationship is just bidirectional. Of course, we are also happy when we're successful and we get that job or the promotion or our project works out well or whatever. Of course, we're happy then too. But it's important to acknowledge that it goes both ways.
That is such an important point and something I have personally focused on a lot. I think, one of the things I love about being a psychologist is I think it forced me to really take care of myself to be able to be really present in sessions. And so I'm huge on, self-care and taking care of yourself first. And I think that that's if someone is feeling a little bit lost, it's a really good starting point. Is just to say it's okay if you don't have it all figured out, just do the things that make you feel good now, and that can kind of help you to get to where you want to go. And if you're not achieving, that's okay. Maybe that's just an indicator that you need to come back and focus on your well-being, focus on your happiness for a little bit. Because as you said, we do know it's all connected, and just things like creativity, our productivity, are all increased when we're more present, we're more mindful, we're in a better state of mind. So sometimes, flipping that script a little bit and focusing in on taking care of yourself will lead to the success maybe that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And it kind of ties nicely to another point I was going to make. And that we spoke about earlier too. So often we think, well-being and more well-being is about more and more, having more, doing more, achieving more. That's again our society, isn't it? But
Mm.
so often well-being is about subtracting rather than adding. And it's just that when we subtract, often we have nothing to show to our Instagram feed. So, but you got to make a choice.
You know what? That just really resonates with me. I had a thought the other day because I was, in that, Instagram kind of thing, just doing Instagram stuff for work. And I was thinking, I'm in this weird space where I feel like the more I see other people succeed and take on, the less I want to do because I just want to stay really present. And I think, we're talking before about coming back from Bali, and for me, trying to maintain some of those changes that I've made and not get caught in the kind of hustle culture and the do and the go is just, really keeping life a little bit simple still. And I think, yeah, I was just looking at, actually, it might have been even LinkedIn that I was on, and just had that thought of like, as you said, people are showcasing the 20 different projects they're juggling. And I was just thinking, I just never want to get back to that place. Like, I just want to maintain focus on the things that bring me pleasure, that I'm enjoying doing in the work, and just let go of all the rest.
I am so hearing you. A few years we moved to the south of France and things sort of happened differently to how we'd planned them. I was planning on settling the kids into school, and once they were settled, I would go and work. Um, and I was so excited about that because in Europe, my qualifications count differently than they do in Australia. And I could actually work as an organizational psychologist again, which I used to in Germany, but was never allowed in Australia. Anyway, and it all came completely different because we spontaneously decided to homeschool the kids, which was obviously then my job. So I didn't work. And our lives, because all of a sudden there was no school and there was only one of us parents working full time, our lives became so simple. So much fell away in terms of preparing, commuting, all these activities, and the more simple our life became, the better it became. And that is something that will stick with me forever. And I'm also trying to preserve. And I think though, because before that, we were very much part of the hustle culture too, and full-time jobs, very
Mhm.
demanding, traveling a lot for work, both parents. So when you weren't traveling for work, you were single parenting and the kids and all the activities on weekends and afternoons. And I don't know, far out. It's like, I just want to scream from the top of my lungs, guys, just chill out, everyone. It is better when you do less. So, but it's hard to protect that, isn't it? When you
Mm,
live in a
mhm.
society where everyone just runs like a hamster for their lives in the hamster wheels. But yeah, wholeheartedly agree. The simpler, the better.
Yeah, it can take it's such a huge shift to make, I think, but once you make it, you do. I feel that when you said hold on to it, I'm like, I just wanna hold on to it as well.
Yeah, but I feel like you have to experience it. You somehow have to be able to experience it. Otherwise, you're not going to believe it. And you probably won't have the courage to try it.
No, and it's not something you can tell people. Like, I think
Mm-mm.
one of the things I've found coming back is just, everyone is so busy all the time. And I just want to sometimes say, you just have to create the space. But I feel like it's so hypocritical and it's such a harsh judgment because I know they're super busy and overwhelmed. And, it is really hard to create space when you don't have it. So just being able to carve out like little bits of time to start making things simpler, it's huge. Like it's a huge thing when you're caught in that busyness. It seems like an impossible task. But when you come out the other end, you just sort of like, I'm never getting back into that level of, it's chaos really. It's living in chaos. If you had a magic wand and you could impart one piece of knowledge or skill on every human, what would it be?
Ooh, I like the idea of a magic wand. It's my favorite coaching question. You stole it. You exposed it. I guess, well, can I cheat and just make it a little bit longer than one word or one skill?
Yeah, of
I would
course.
probably, I would probably say it's something like courageous and self-compassionate self-awareness. Just because based on everything we just discussed, we need that self-awareness. We need then the courage to actually go our own path. And I'm just throwing in self-compassion, which we haven't spoken about, but self-compassion has changed my own life. And I constantly work with clients who are so high achieving and they are so hard on themselves and they believe they need to be hard on themselves in order to keep that bar high. Research
Yes.
shows the exact opposite. And any anecdotes I have from myself and any of my clients and the people around me, it is complete bullshit. Research shows so clearly that when we become kind to ourselves, we actually become more productive, more you know, more high achieving or whatever. And that's not even the point. It's just the right way to be and treat yourself.
Mm.
Mhm.
That really resonates in terms of, yeah, client work. I hear that a lot actually, and it's a hard thing for people to move through and let go
Yeah,
of.
I
It's
know.
huge, really
We're so
huge.
hard on
So
ourselves. Yeah.
we are so hard on ourselves. Thank
Mm.
you so much for the conversation. How can people find
Amazing.
you?
Oh, they can find me, well, on LinkedIn under my name, which you might have to spell out in the show notes somewhere. It's
I
Dr. Maike
definitely will.
Neuhaus. And on my website, theflourishingdoc.com, or my Instagram, which is also at theflourishingdoc.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you, Katie.
Subscribe for more conversations filled with new insights, inspiration, and practical tools to create a life you love.